Alright guys, so the last video we talked about how the guy with the warehouse was storing everybody's gold because nobody wanted to carry it around because it's too heavy, too clunky, too bulky, and they couldn't make daily purchases of the borrowed gold because they can't break it down because of portability and divisibility issues. So then he started storing their gold and then giving out receipts for each one of their gold. However, he was tempted by greed to basically create more receipts of gold that doesn't exist in the vault in order to pass them out and loan them out to people for money, for interest every year, right? And so he was collecting a lot of interest money, and his greed got the best of him. He kept doing it, eventually to where he got, let's say, 10 receipts out for only 5 bars of gold. And so when everyone decided to come back and say, hey, we want our gold back, we got to move to a different town, he doesn't have enough gold to cover for the receipts, and so he defaulted and he ran away or whatever. So that was a true story, okay? So now we're going to go ahead and talk about how the government basically did the exact same thing, except on a much, much, much larger scale. So the government, at first, what they did was they bought up all the gold that they could, right? They pretty much went and just bought a crap ton of gold, and then they put it into their reserve, their vault, right? The central banks, the Federal Reserve, whatever. They put it into their reserve. And so then they started coming out with this new decree that, hey, we're going to have this form of money that we will regulate, right? And it's called, let's say, the US dollar. And every country, of course, have their own currency. They have the euro, they have the US dollar, the Japanese yen, the pound, so to speak, right? But we're going to look at the dollar as an example today. So the US, the government, they bought all the gold they can. They kept in the vault, and then they started issuing this paper money called US dollar. But they promised us that the dollar would be pegged to the gold, as in the value of the dollar will always only fluctuate in accordance with how much the price of gold fluctuate. That way that we know that, hey, we're still using the best form of money, which is gold, but it's just a paper form now, and it's much easier to carry around. It's much easier to break it down. A dollar can be broken down into 100 cents, for example, and it's a lot more convenient for people. So basically the government came in and they solved these two problems for the people, so to speak, right? That was the way that they presented it. Like, oh, we found a solution to these two problems right here, and we're going to solve it for you. We're just going to buy a bunch of gold, keep that in the reserve, and we will only issue more paper dollar if we buy more gold, right? So basically, if we have $1 worth of gold, then we will only have that $1 worth of gold in circulation. If we want to make more dollar, we need to go and buy more gold or mine more gold in order to have basically a one-to-one reserve peg, pretty much, right? So that was their promise originally, right? Of course, we all know what happened. I believe it was in 1960s or something when they started coming up with a new idea, because of course, as human beings, guys, we are tempted by greed, okay, all the time. And that goes for anybody. That goes for me, you, that goes for the government, anybody, right? We will always be tempted by greed because we want more, right? And if the opportunity is there, we will take it. The same as the gold warehouse guys that we talked about in the previous video. So the government eventually said, you know what, this is what we're going to do. They end up going to every single house, every citizen, and they confiscated all of their gold. Now, it wasn't exactly confiscation, quote unquote, because they paid them for it, right? Like, let's say 1 ounce of gold is worth $1, for example. They went to everyone's house and they took all of their gold by force, right? Basically, if you don't give it up, we're going to put you in prison, kind of thing. And we'll give you money for it. So basically, they're going around buying everybody's gold, but it wasn't a free will, right? Like, the citizen didn't want us to sell them their gold. They forced themselves they forced the people to sell them their gold. So to me, that's confiscation, that's theft. Even though you paid them for it, it doesn't matter. So they went around and they basically took everybody's gold, and they just, they make sure that there was no more gold outside of their control. So, and they pay money for it, right? So 1 ounce of gold equal to $1, for example. If they confiscated, let's say 1,000 ounces of gold, they'll pay $1,000 out, right? So that was what they did in the 1960s. And of course, in 1971 was when everything went to shit, right? That's the year when Richard Nixon, the president, signed a piece of paper that basically said that we will now no longer have the pegged to gold with the US dollar. Basically, they cut that tie from the dollar to gold, right? And it was supposed to be temporary, but of course, as we know, it was never meant to be temporary, because to this day we're still on that standard, right? So basically, what that means is he cut the tie from the dollar to gold, meaning that from now on, the value of the dollar no longer has to be pegged to gold. So that means that they are free to create more dollars if they wish without mining more gold. So they can have, before, when they have, let's say, $1 million worth of gold in their vault, they're only allowed to give out $1 million of paper money into circulation. But now, after they signed that bill, that 1971 bill, now they can create as much dollar as they want without having to actually go get more gold. So now the whole concept of scarcity is now destroyed, because the only reason why we still had good money was because we had it pegged to gold, because gold is very hard to make. And so the government pretty much found themselves a loophole. They found themselves a cheat code, right? They said, what if we took everybody's gold, right, give them money for it, and then went and pretty much signed this bill in 1971 that says, oh, by the way, actually, now that we have all your gold, we're no longer going to tie the US dollar to the gold price. Now, the dollar is whatever we want it to be, pretty much. So then they went and they just printed more and more money in order to fund for their war, for the World War. They print more money for military programs, for, whatever it is that their government agenda happened to have at the time. And that's how they funded for everything. And so now the dollar, because there's way more dollar in circulation than there is gold, of course, the value of the dollar went down against gold. So now, instead of back then where it was just 1 ounce of gold equal 1 ounce of dollar, for example, now I think right now it's $1,800 per ounce of gold. So as you can see, they gave you this paper money and took your gold, and then they devalued that paper money, and then they left you holding the bag, right? They left you holding a currency that's being weakened by themselves. So that's pretty much what happened, guys, and that's the problem, all this time. And that's the problem with everything that we have going on in the world today, with inflation. When the law of supply and demand, that's all there is to it. Okay, the law of supply and demand says that when the more supply of something there is, the value of that thing will go down. So basically, when they supply more of the dollar get printed, more dollars get printed and put into circulation, the value of the dollar that's, in circulation simultaneously goes down. And therefore, that's why everything costs more, because the value of your money is now less and less and weaker, and it's not in your control. It's their fault. They did it, and they're still doing it to this day.